I kneel on the floor, picking up shards of glass with shaking fingers. The pieces are small but sharp, biting into my skin as I collect them in my palm. A few drops of blood bloom across my lifeline. I should grab a broom, but I can't seem to move. In the next room, Daniel is passed out again. His arm dangles off the couch, an empty bottle on the floor beneath his fingers, its last drops soaking into the carpet. His mouth is slightly open, his chest rising and falling in the slow, heavy rhythm of deep intoxication. He'll wake up later, disoriented, apologetic. Or worse, angry. I exhale, the sound shaky hollow. The cracked mirror in front of me catches my reflection. My face is framed in fractures. The woman staring back at me looks tired, her eyes dull, her skin sallow. There's something eerie about it, like I'm looking at a stranger. And maybe I am. If I keep trying, I won't survive this. The words slip out before I can stop them, barely above a whisper, as if saying them too loud will make them real. 5 years. 5 years of making excuses to friends, to myself. 5 years of cleaning up his messes, literal and emotional. 5 years of swallowing his guilt trips, of staying up late to make sure he was still breathing, of telling myself I could save him. The first time I tried to leave was 2 years ago. I made it as far as my sister's house before his calls started flooding in. He begged, sobbed, swore he'd change, said he wouldn't survive without me. And I believed him, because that's what love does, right? It makes you believe in the best parts of someone, even when the worst parts are swallowing them whole. So I came back. And the cycle repeated. Tonight, it was another drunken rage. Another broken plate. Another slurred accusation about how I don't understand, about how I'm the only one he has left. Then, the inevitable collapse into unconsciousness. And now, here I am, picking up the pieces. Again. I stand up carefully, glass pressing into my palm, and make my way to the trash can. The house smells like stale alcohol and regret. The kitchen light flickers slightly, the bulb struggling to hold on, just like me. That's when I see it. The photo. It's crumpled near the table, caught beneath an overturned glass. I reach for it, my fingers brushing over the edges. When I flip it over, something inside me cracks. It's me. Or at least, it was. I'm laughing in the picture, head tilted back slightly, the sun catching my hair. It must be from 6, maybe 7 years ago, before Daniel, before the slow erosion of myself. There's a lightness in my eyes that feels foreign now. I run my thumb over the image, over the version of me that hadn't yet learned what it meant to disappear inside someone else's chaos. I glance up at the cracked mirror again. The woman in the photo and the woman in the mirror are not the same. And they never will be again if I don't walk away. My heart slams against my ribs as the realization hits. Not in some dramatic, sudden burst, but in a quiet, devastating certainty. I can't fix him. And if I stay, I will lose myself completely. I set the photo down on the table, smoothing it flat. Then I turn and walk to the bedroom. I pull an old duffel bag from the closet and start packing, not with frantic desperation, not with fear, but with a steady, final resolve. I take only what I need. The weight of my choice settles into my bones, heavy but necessary. Daniel shifts slightly in the next room, murmuring something in his sleep. But he doesn't wake up. By the time I step outside, the first light of dawn is creeping over the horizon. The air is cool, crisp. I stand there for a moment, inhaling deeply, feeling the cold air fill my lungs. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what comes next. But for the first time in years, I know this. I am leaving. And I am not looking back. I didn't think about where I was going until I reached the end of the block. The cold air bit at my face, waking up nerves that had been numb for years. My bag was slung over my shoulder, its weight unfamiliar. I tightened my grip on the strap and kept walking. The street was quiet, the kind of silence that only exists in the early hours before the world wakes up. A streetlight flickered above me. I had nowhere to go. My sister, she was my safest option, but I had worn out her patience the last time. My phone was in my jacket pocket, the battery barely holding on. I could call her, explain that this time was different, but what if she didn't believe me? What if I didn't believe me? I kept moving. The weight of 5 years pressed against my ribs, but there was something else too, an urgency that hadn't been there before. I had left. I had actually left. The thought sent a sharp jolt of fear through me, but there was no time to sit with it. Not yet. A car passed slowly on the other side of the street, headlights washing over me. I turned my face away, instinct kicking in. I didn't want to be seen. I felt exposed, like Daniel could wake up at any moment, realize what I'd done, and come looking for me. And then what? Would he cry? Beg? Would he scream? Or worse, would he do nothing? Would he just let me go? I shook the thought away and kept walking. The gas station at the corner was still open, its fluorescent lights buzzing against the dark. I pushed open the door, the chime too loud, making my stomach tighten. The man behind the counter barely looked up from his phone. I made my way to the back, grabbed a bottle of water. My hands were still shaking when I reached into my pocket and pulled out a few crumpled bills. Enough for water and maybe a cheap coffee, but not much else. I hadn't planned for this. Not really. When I stepped up to the counter, the man glanced at me, then did a double take. You okay? His voice was rough, disinterested, but something about it made me realize what I must look like. Hair a mess, eyes tired, a duffel bag at my feet like I was running from something. I forced a nod. Yeah, just. Long night. He didn't push. Just rang me up and handed back my change. I took my things and left, stepping back out into the cold. My hands wrapped around the bottle, the plastic crinkling under my grip. I needed a plan. That's when my phone buzzed. I froze. The sound, the vibration against my palm, it sent a rush of panic straight to my chest. I knew who it was before I even looked. Daniel. For a second, I couldn't breathe. The screen lit up with his name, the letters glowing in the dark. My thumb hovered over the button. Answer or ignore. If I ignored it, he'd call again. If I answered, what? What would I say? I hit decline. Seconds later, another buzz. A voicemail. I didn't listen to it. I shoved the phone back into my pocket and walked faster. The city was waking up now, streetlights flickering off, cars starting to pass more frequently. I needed somewhere to go. My sister was still an option, but I couldn't show up like this. Not yet. A motel. I could stay somewhere for the night, figure things out in the morning. I pulled out my phone again, checked my bank account. The balance made my stomach sink. Not enough for more than a night or two. I kept moving, mind racing. I had left him before, but this time had to be different. I couldn't go back. Then, another buzz. Another call. And this time, I made a mistake. I answered. Where are you? His voice was thick, groggy. Not angry. Not yet. I said nothing. Babe, please. Just tell me where you are. I swallowed hard. I can't do this anymore, Daniel. My voice came out quieter than I wanted. A long pause. A deep breath. Just come home. We can talk. My grip on the phone tightened. I had fallen for this before, the soft voice, the false promises. No. Silence. Then, something new in his tone. Something I wasn't prepared for. Fine, he said, voice flat. Do whatever you want. Then the line went dead. I stared at my phone, at the empty screen, at the call log with his name still glowing at the top. He had never done that before. No pleading, no yelling, just nothing. It should have made me feel relieved. Instead, my stomach twisted. Because suddenly, I realized he wasn't going to chase me. He wasn't going to fight for me. He was going to let me go. And for some reason, that scared me more than anything. I kept walking, but my body felt disconnected from my mind. The phone call echoed in my head, every word replaying until it didn't sound real anymore. He let me go. Just like that. No begging, no accusations, no threats. Nothing. It should have been a relief, but instead, it felt like stepping off a ledge and realizing there was no ground beneath me. I spotted a rundown motel a few blocks ahead. The neon vacancy sign flickered erratically, buzzing in the early morning quiet. It wasn't much, but it was something. My legs ached from walking, my thoughts were spinning, and my body needed somewhere to land. I stepped inside, the air thick with stale smoke and old coffee. The woman behind the counter barely looked up as I set down my bag. "Single room," I said, reaching for my wallet. "Cash or card?" Her voice was flat, impatient. "Card." I slid it across the counter, hoping it would go through. She ran it, eyes barely flicking to the screen before she handed it back. "Room 12. Down the hall, second door on the right." I took the key, muttered a thanks, and grabbed my bag. The hallway smelled like mildew. The carpet was worn, frayed at the edges, but I didn't care. The room was small, one bed, a nightstand, a flickering lamp. The bathroom door didn't close all the way. The walls were stained from years of people passing through, leaving their ghosts behind. I locked the door, set my bag down, and sat on the bed. My hands were still shaking. I didn't know if it was from exhaustion, fear, or something worse. My phone sat next to me, screen dark. I wanted to turn it off, but I couldn't. I kept expecting another call, another message. Something. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Nothing. I laid back against the pillow, staring at the ceiling. The room felt too quiet. My mind kept drifting back, to the sound of his voice, to the way he had just let me go. I had spent 5 years believing he couldn't live without me. 5 years thinking if I left, he would break. But he didn't. He didn't fight. He didn't even try. I turned onto my side, eyes burning. Maybe this was what I wanted. Maybe this was good. But then why did it feel like something was pressing against my chest, making it hard to breathe? I forced myself to sit up, grabbed my phone, and scrolled through my messages. There were a few from my sister, old ones, asking if I was okay. I should tell her I left. I should call her. But I didn't. Instead, I found myself doing something I hadn't planned. I searched his name. Scrolled through old texts. Found the ones from 2 years ago, the last time I left. The endless apologies, the desperation, the promises. And then, the ones from last night. The silence. I tapped my voicemail. The one he had left earlier. My stomach twisted as I pressed play. At first, all I could hear was breathing. Then his voice, low, quiet. "I get it." A pause. "You're done." Another breath. "I won't stop you." There was something in his tone I didn't recognize. Something hollow. Just, be safe. A click. That was it. I set the phone down, hands cold. I had expected anger. I had expected manipulation, guilt, something to pull me back in. But not this. Not this emptiness. I laid back down, staring at the ceiling again. Sleep didn't come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the past 5 years play out in flashes, arguments that went in circles, nights spent waiting for him to come home, the way I had convinced myself love meant staying even when it hurt. Sometime in the middle of the night, I drifted off. It wasn't restful. I woke up to a dull knock at the door. My body went stiff. Another knock. My pulse hammered in my throat. No one knew I was here. No one except. I moved to the door, heart racing. Peered through the peephole. Not Daniel. A man stood there, late 40s, unshaven, eyes shifting like he was looking for something. He didn't knock again. Just stood there. I stepped back, breath shallow. Had he followed me? Sent someone? No. That was paranoia. But then, who is this? I stayed still, waiting. After what felt like forever, he finally turned and walked away. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My hands were shaking again. I locked the door, checked it twice. And then, for the first time since leaving, I started to wonder if I had really gotten away at all. The knock had stopped, but the tension in my body hadn't. I sat on the edge of the bed, listening. The hallway outside was silent. No footsteps. No voices. Just the hum of a vending machine from somewhere down the corridor. I should have felt relieved, but something wasn't right. I stood up slowly, moved toward the door, and checked the peephole again. Nothing. The man was gone. I still didn't know who he was, or why he had been standing there without saying a word. He hadn't knocked like someone looking for the wrong room. He had knocked like someone who already knew what was on the other side. I turned back to my bag, forcing myself to breathe evenly. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I was imagining threats that weren't there. Maybe I had spent so long waiting for Daniel to come after me that my mind had latched onto the first sign of something unusual, twisting it into danger. I sat back down, rubbed my hands over my face. My phone was next to me. No missed calls. No texts. Nothing. Daniel hadn't tried again. He had let me go, and now I was alone in a cheap motel, paranoid about a stranger. I had wanted this freedom. So why did it feel like the walls were closing in? I forced myself to lie down, but my body wouldn't relax. Sleep wasn't coming back. I stared at the ceiling until the first hints of morning light seeped through the curtain, and then I gave up. I grabbed my bag, checked my wallet, and made a decision. I wasn't staying another night. The motel lobby smelled like burnt coffee. The woman behind the counter barely looked up as I dropped my key on the desk. "Checking out early?" she asked, voice flat. "Yeah." She nodded, went back to whatever was on her screen. No questions. No concern. I was just another passing ghost. The air outside was crisp, the streets still quiet. I pulled my jacket tighter and started walking. I needed a plan, something solid. My bank account wouldn't last long. My sister was still an option, but I couldn't just show up without warning. I reached the end of the block and paused. A gas station sat across the street, the same one from last night. I could grab coffee, figure out my next move. I stepped onto the crosswalk, but before I reached the other side, I saw him. The man from the motel. He was standing near the entrance, leaning against the wall, smoking a cigarette. His eyes flicked up, met mine. He didn't look surprised to see me. He looked like he had been waiting. I stopped walking. He exhaled smoke, took another drag, then flicked the cigarette to the ground and crushed it under his boot. He didn't move toward me. He just watched. Every instinct told me to turn around, walk the other way. But I couldn't. I needed to know. I crossed the rest of the street, keeping my distance. "Were you at the motel last night?" My voice was steady, but my pulse wasn't. The man tilted his head slightly, like he was deciding how to answer. Then he shrugged. "Maybe." My stomach tightened. "Why?" "You got a lot of questions for someone who doesn't want to be found." I took a step back. "Who sent you?" The man smirked. "No one. Just keeping an eye on things." He nodded toward my bag. "Where you headed?" I didn't answer. He chuckled, low and dry. "Figured." He stepped away from the wall, stretching like he had all the time in the world. "Look, lady, I don't care what you did or who you ran from. I just deliver messages." A cold weight settled in my chest. "From who?" The smirk faded. His expression turned unreadable. "He says he won't stop you. But he's watching." The words hit like a punch to the ribs. "Daniel." The man turned, walked past me without another word, disappearing down the street. I stood there, heart hammering, mind racing. Daniel wasn't chasing me. He wasn't begging me to come back. But he wasn't letting me go either. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, the weight of the man's words pressing into my chest. "He says he won't stop you. But he's watching." The street felt too open now, the morning light too sharp. I glanced down the direction the man had walked, but he was already gone, swallowed into the movement of the city. My hands clenched around the strap of my bag. I had left, I had walked away, but Daniel still had his grip on me in a way I hadn't seen coming. He wasn't going to fight for me. He wasn't going to chase me. But he wasn't going to let me disappear either. I turned sharply and walked into the gas station, my pulse hammering in my throat. The air inside smelled like stale coffee and cleaning chemicals. I grabbed a bottle of water without thinking, moving automatically toward the counter. The clerk was a different guy from last night, younger, disinterested, scrolling through his phone. I paid in cash, shoved the change into my pocket, and stepped back outside. The street stretched in both directions, unfamiliar and indifferent. For the first time since I left, I felt something worse than fear. I felt trapped. I needed to move. I needed a plan. My sister was an option, but if Daniel knew where I was, he could find her too. I had to think beyond that. My phone vibrated in my pocket, and my stomach twisted before I even pulled it out. Not Daniel. My sister. A text. "Saw your missed call." What's going on? I hesitated before typing back. I left him. A few seconds passed before the dots appeared, disappearing and reappearing like she was debating what to say. Then, for real this time? Yes. Another pause. Where are you? I hesitated. Not sure. Just needed to tell someone. Come here. Please. I exhaled slowly, my fingers tightening around my phone. It was the first safe option I had. The smart choice. But something in my gut resisted. The man's words kept circling in my head. He's watching. Had Daniel sent him as a warning? Or was it something else? I glanced around. No sign of anyone watching. No black cars idling at the curb. No figures lingering in doorways. Just people going about their lives, the city moving like it always had. I forced my legs to move, walking briskly toward the nearest bus stop. I didn't have a car. My money wouldn't last long. But I needed to put space between me and whatever Daniel had planned next. The bus ride was long, every stop making me more restless. My sister lived an hour outside the city in a neighborhood that felt like another world. Quiet, steady, predictable. The kind of place where people noticed when something was out of place. I got off at the corner near her house, gripping my bag a little tighter as I walked up the driveway. Her porch light was still on even though it was daylight now. The door opened before I even knocked. She looked at me for a long second before pulling me inside. You look like hell, she said. Feel worse. She shut the door behind me, locking it out of habit. How bad was it? I dropped my bag by the couch. Not bad. Just overdue. She studied me carefully. You're scared. It wasn't a question. I sank onto the couch. He's not chasing me. But he's keeping tabs. He sent someone. Her expression hardened. Jesus. Did they hurt you? No. Just a message. I rubbed my hands over my face. I thought leaving would be the hardest part, but it's like he's still pulling the strings. Just in a different way. She sat down across from me, arms crossed. He's not going to stop unless you make him. I looked up at her. What does that even mean? It means you can't just leave and hope he lets you go. He still thinks he has some control over you. You have to break that completely. I swallowed hard. And how do I do that? You cut the last thread. The one he's holding on to. I shook my head. I don't even know what that is anymore. She leaned forward. Think. What does he still have on you? What's keeping him from letting go? I stared at the floor, my mind racing. And then it hit me. Not a thing. A person. My heart dropped. He still has the photo. She frowned. What photo? The one I found before I left. Of me. From before him. I stood up abruptly, my pulse pounding. I left it on the table. I didn't think. She was already shaking her head. You think that's why he's watching? I didn't know. But something about it felt right. He had never been sentimental. He didn't keep things. But that photo, that version of me, was the last piece of control he had left. I grabbed my phone, my fingers tightening around it. I need to go back. Her eyes widened. Are you out of your mind? I was. But I also knew, in that moment, that this wouldn't end until I made it end. And I was done waiting for Daniel to decide when that would be. I didn't tell my sister when I left. I couldn't. If I said it out loud, she would try to stop me. She would talk me down, tell me it wasn't worth it. And maybe she'd be right. But this wasn't about logic. This was about ending it, about making sure there was nothing left for Daniel to hold on to. Because as long as he had that piece of me, I wasn't free. I took the next bus back into the city, sitting near the back, my bag tight against my side. My mind ran through every possible scenario, but nothing felt solid. I didn't know what I was walking into. If Daniel was still there. If he had already thrown the photo away. If he was waiting for me. When the bus stopped a few blocks from my old house, I hesitated before stepping off. Everything looked the same, but I wasn't. I pulled my hood up, shoved my hands into my pockets, and walked quickly, head down. The neighborhood was quiet. A few cars and driveways. Curtains pulled back slightly, just enough for people to watch without being seen. Nothing here had changed. It never did. I reached the house. The blinds in the front window were half open. The porch light was still on, even in the daylight. His car was in the driveway. He was home. I clenched my jaw and walked toward the door, my steps steady. No hesitation. No fear. I had spent years tiptoeing around him, managing his moods, waiting for the right time to say the wrong thing. That version of me didn't exist anymore. I raised my fist and knocked. Seconds passed. The door didn't open. I knocked again, harder. Then I heard movement inside. A slow shuffle. A deep breath. And then the door creaked open. Daniel stood there, leaning against the frame. His eyes were bloodshot, his face unshaven. He didn't look angry. He didn't look relieved. He just looked at me, like he had been expecting this. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice rough. I stepped forward, not letting myself falter. "Where is it?" He didn't ask what I meant. His jaw tightened. He leaned against the doorframe, like he was debating whether to let me in or not. Then, finally, he stepped aside. I walked in without hesitation. The air was thick with the stale scent of liquor, but I barely noticed. My eyes went straight to the table. Empty. The living room was the same mess I had left behind, bottles, clothes, an overturned chair, but the photo was gone. I turned back to him. "Where is it?" He shut the door, ran a hand through his hair. "I don't know what you're talking about." I took a step closer. "Don't lie to me." A flicker of something passed through his expression. Amusement? Annoyance? I couldn't tell anymore. He exhaled, crossed his arms. "You came all the way back for a picture?" "I came back to end this," I said. "Give it to me." He studied me for a long moment. Then, slowly, he turned and walked toward the kitchen. I followed, my pulse steady, my mind sharp. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. He reached into a drawer, pulled out a folded piece of paper. Not the photo. Something else. He held it out. I didn't take it. "What is that?" "You think you know everything, but you don't," he said, his voice quieter now. He unfolded the paper and placed it on the counter between us. "I didn't keep the photo to hold on to you." I looked down. It was a letter. My handwriting. A letter I had written to him years ago, back when I still believed he could change. Back when I still thought love meant endurance. I swallowed hard. "Why do you have this?" His expression was unreadable. "Because I read it every night after you left." My chest tightened, but I forced my voice to stay even. "That's not my problem anymore." He studied me, searching for something in my face, but I didn't give him anything. Finally, he nodded, almost to himself, and reached into another drawer. He pulled out the photo and placed it next to the letter. "You can take it," he said. "But it won't change anything." I picked up the photo. The image of my younger self stared back at me, untouched, unchanged. I slid it into my pocket. "You're right. It won't." I turned and walked out without another word. I walked out of the house without looking back, my grip on the photo tight inside my pocket. The door clicked shut behind me, and for the first time in 5 years, I was certain I would never walk through it again. I moved quickly down the steps, out onto the sidewalk, keeping my pace steady. The air felt heavier now, the silence stretched too thin. I had what I came for, but there was no relief, no sudden sense of closure. Something in the back of my mind was still waiting for the other shoe to drop. I reached the bus stop at the end of the block, my hands still clenched. My body was tense, wired from everything that had just happened. The bus wasn't due for another 15 minutes. I exhaled slowly and forced myself to loosen my grip, to roll my shoulders back. It was done. Daniel had given me the photo. He had let me go. There was nothing left for him to hold on to. A car rolled slowly past, and my stomach twisted before my brain caught up. Dark blue sedan, old model. It didn't stop, didn't hesitate. Just passed by like any other car. But the tension stayed locked in my ribs. My breathing felt uneven again. I was being paranoid. That was all. Another minute passed. The bus was late. I shifted my weight from foot to foot, trying to shake the feeling crawling under my skin. The street was too quiet. A door slammed somewhere behind me, and I forced myself not to react. I was done looking over my shoulder. Then I saw the blue sedan again. This time, it wasn't passing by. It was parked across the street, engine running. My breath stalled. I glanced away, forcing my expression to stay neutral. The windows were tinted, but not dark enough. I could see the outline of someone in the driver's seat. No movement. No indication that they were about to leave. I didn't turn around. I didn't check if Daniel was standing at the door watching this unfold. I just reached into my bag, grabbed my phone, and called my sister. She answered on the second ring. "Are you okay?" "Yeah," I said, keeping my voice even. "Can you come get me?" Something in my tone must have tipped her off. "Where are you?" I told her the intersection. She didn't ask questions. "I'm on my way." I ended the call and tucked my phone back into my pocket. My heart was hammering now, but I forced my body to stay still. The bus wasn't coming. That much I knew. Whether by coincidence or something else, the timing was too perfect. Someone wanted me to wait here. The car didn't move. I inhaled slowly and turned toward the opposite direction of the bus stop, walking away like I had somewhere else to be. My legs felt stiff, my pulse in my ears, but I didn't speed up. If they followed, I needed to know. I made it half a block before I heard the engine. The low, steady hum of a car rolling forward at a pace too slow to be normal. Not paranoia. Not this time. I turned sharply down the next street. My sister wasn't far. I just needed to make it a little longer. My mind raced through options, exits. Houses lined the block, most of them with cars in the driveway, lights in the windows. It wasn't an empty street. Whoever was in that car wasn't going to make a move here. But they weren't leaving either. I kept walking, gripping my bag, listening to the sound of my own footsteps over the faint hum of the car behind me. Then, another sound cut through. Tires rolling against gravel. The car pulling up closer. My phone vibrated in my pocket, but I didn't stop to check. Then a voice. Low, calm. Too familiar. "Get in the car." My stomach dropped. I didn't stop walking. I didn't acknowledge him. "Come on," the voice said again. "You know this isn't over." Daniel. The car was rolling alongside me now, keeping pace. My sister's house was close. I could see the street sign ahead. I was almost there. Daniel sighed from the driver's seat. "You really think I don't know where you're going?" I clenched my teeth, my hands fists at my sides. "You got what you wanted," he said. "I gave it to you. But you still came back. You still needed something from me." I reached the edge of the block. His car stopped at the intersection, the engine still running. I turned my head just enough to meet his eyes through the window. Not anymore. Then I stepped onto my sister's street, and I kept walking. I didn't look back. The weight of his stare pressed into my back, but I forced myself forward. My sister's house was just ahead, porch lights still glowing against the early evening dimness. The door would be unlocked. I just had to reach it. My feet hit the pavement in steady steps, my heart hammering out an uneven rhythm in my chest. Daniel's car didn't move. He didn't call after me again. He just sat there, engine running, watching. I climbed the porch steps and pulled the door open without knocking. My sister was already in the entryway, phone in hand, eyes sharp with concern. "You took too long," she said, scanning my face. Then she glanced past me, out the window. "Is he here?" I stepped inside, shutting the door behind me. "Yeah." She locked it, checking the deadbolt twice, then moved the curtain aside just enough to peer out. I stood in the center of the living room, bag still slung over my shoulder, trying to slow my breathing. "He's not moving," she muttered. "He's just sitting there." I didn't respond. I wasn't surprised. Daniel never acted immediately. He was calculated, measured. That was always the problem. He didn't explode, didn't lash out. He let things build, stretching the silence until it cracked. I set my bag down, rubbed my hands over my face. He's trying to get in my head. My sister let the curtain fall back into place and turned to me. "Then don't let him." She crossed the room, grabbed my bag, and shoved it toward me. "We're leaving." I frowned. "What? You just walked out of that house for the last time, and now he's parked outside mine?" "No. I'm not playing this game. Get your stuff. We're going." I hesitated. "Where?" "A hotel, another city, I don't care." But I'm not going to wake up with him sitting outside my house tomorrow. Let's go. She didn't give me time to argue. She grabbed her own bag, slung her jacket over her shoulders, and yanked open the back door instead of the front. A side exit. A way out without crossing his path. I followed, stepping into the cold night air, my body still wired from everything that had happened. We moved quickly, keeping low, cutting through her backyard and slipping into the alley behind the houses. My sister didn't slow until we reached the car parked a few streets down. She unlocked it, slid into the driver's seat, and started the engine in one smooth motion. I got in, shutting the door as she pulled onto the road. I glanced back once. Daniel's car was still in front of her house, his silhouette motionless behind the wheel. Then he was gone. We drove in silence for a while, the weight of everything settling in. My sister didn't ask questions. She just kept driving, her grip on the wheel tight, her jaw clenched. After a while, she finally spoke. "You're done, right?" I exhaled slowly. "Yeah." She didn't respond immediately, just nodded once and kept her eyes on the road. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the photo, unfolding it carefully. The girl in the picture looked back at me, lighter, freer. I stared at her for a long moment before rolling down the window. The wind rushed in, cold against my skin. Then I let the photo go. It fluttered out, lost to the night, disappearing in the rearview mirror. I didn't need it anymore. You can give everything to someone, but if they don't want to change, you'll lose yourself trying to save them. Walking away isn't weakness, it's the only way to survive.